Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, I interview peak performing innovators in the creative, social impact, and earth conservation spaces who are working to change the world. This episode is brought to you by Brain FM. Brain FM combines the best of music and neuroscience to help you relax, focus, meditate, and even sleep. I love it and have been using it to write, create, and do some of my deepest work. Because you're a listener of the show, you can get a free trial. Head over to brain.fm/innovative mindset to check it out. If you decide to subscribe, you can get 20% off with the coupon code Innovative Mindset, all one word. And now, let's get to the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. I am super thrilled you're here. I am so honored to have this set of episodes for you. I am here with three amazing artists, and I'm going to introduce them to you in a minute, but here's what we're doing, and it's super cool. We are going to go through a process of creative rediscovery and creative recovery. What we're going to be doing is going through Julia Cameron's very famous book, The Artist's Way. You're going to hear our discussions, our thoughts, our ideas, our inspirations, all about this book as we go through it chapter by chapter for the next 12 weeks. It's amazing to me that we're doing this because the book is great, but sometimes things go wonky when you're trying to do the book. A lot of people start the book but don't finish. A lot of people have had it on their shelves for decades and have never done it. And it changed my life when I did it. So I'm super, super thrilled to bring it to you in this way in hopes that it will inspire you to do your own journey in the artist's way. And if not, if you want to be a little bit more mindful about it without a 12-step program, I'm currently writing The Mindful Creative, which is all about creative sort of mindfulness and how you're going to be able to use that in your work in your life. So there's going to be more exciting stuff. But without further ado, let me introduce to you the three, I guess, co-conspirators, partners in crime, partners in creativity. I'd like to introduce Alan Fessenden, who is an artist, actor, writer, and creator, Sergio Giovanni, who's a writer, musician, and advocate, and Megan Vasilis, who is a writer, poet, and an aspiring podcaster. This is super exciting. Welcome to the show, y'all.
Hi, thanks, Isolde.
I'm so excited to be doing this. And before we go any further, I would love it if you all would tell me a little bit, and I'm going to ask you to go one after the other. Usually it'll be Alan, Sergio, Megan. If you'd tell me a little bit about what brought you to this project, outside of me haranguing you, what made you decide that this project is something that you wanted to do? Alan, why don't you go first? Well, let me tell you. Wait, hold on one sec. Yeah. Tell me who you are, what you do, and then tell me what brought you to the project.
Oh my God, who am I? I'm an actor and a writer in New York City, talking to you from my bathroom, hoping the sound doesn't get crazy. And I actually had picked up The Artist's Way surprisingly right before the pandemic, after people told me a lot about it. Like artist theater people are always like, oh, morning pages, artist day. And I was like, what is all that stuff? That sounds like stuff I don't want to do. But then I finally picked it up and I started doing the morning pages, and I was like, I need to just do that. And I did that for like 2 months before I really like cracked into the book. And then I started doing the weeks, and the weeks just bore down upon me. And I was like, this is too much, too personal, too revealing. And I think I went back, I left it or something. A lot has happened over the last 2 years, but I just fell out of doing the morning pages. And I think I felt like I got behind in the book. So I'm excited to take another stab at it. And as you know, I'm very nervous about failing again at doing this. So I'm excited to have you guys here to keep me accountable, and everyone listening to also hear my proclamation that I will complete this artist way with you guys.
Awesome. That's great. And you already touched on about 42 different things that I would like to talk about or later this episode. So that's really cool. But one of the ones, the big one, is vulnerability, and the fact that this is a process of being pretty vulnerable with yourself. And if you're doing it in a group with others, which is, it's powerful and it's courageous. And I applaud you for embarking on it once again, Alan. Thank you so much for being here. Sergio, I would love it if you would do the same thing. Tell me who you are. Tell me what brought you to this process. Again, outside of me haranguing you to take part.
No, yeah, thank you so much again for allowing me to be here, first and foremost. My name is Sergio Giovanni. I'm a writer, musician, and advocate from New York. And I've worked in education for over a decade, but this past year, I've really wanted to take an initiative with my creative endeavors and writing especially. And so I joined this really awesome NYC vegan writers group where I got to meet some great people that I'm luckily enough to do this series with. And yeah, so I've never done the artist way. This is my first time doing it. And when I heard about it and I looked into it, I really thought it was going to be nothing but beneficial. But I won't lie, I have to be honest, it does seem a little daunting, the morning pages and the artist dates, and just being able to stick through to 3 months of this. So excuse me, I'm gonna have to agree with Alan, if that's okay, and say that I'm grateful to have you to do this with, and just really looking forward to seeing how this process goes.
That's awesome. And it's perfectly okay, I think, to agree with Alan. Alan, you can contradict me if I'm wrong.
No, I love when people agree with me.
I hope that's okay, Alan. I'm not sure if you're fine with people agreeing with you.
Well, if you're my husband, you actually do mind it with people when people agree with you. He does that Groucho Marx thing. You know, he'd never be a member of a club that would have him as a member. So if you agree with him too much, he gets antsy. So, you know, it's interesting, Sergio. I understand how daunting it can be, but one of the things that I'm really glad about that we are doing this together is because we can hold each other accountable. And that's, you know, if you're listening to this episode and you're going, also, we are right there with you. It is a daunting task because it asks you to be vulnerable. It asks you to take time out of every week to do it, right? And so I totally get where you're coming from, Sergio, and hopefully together we'll be able to sort of keep each other going and inspire each other to keep trying and keep pushing our limits. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you again. I'm really grateful to be here. And I agree, a little accountability can go a long way. So thanks again.
For sure. Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what brought you to this process?
Definitely. So I'm a marketing specialist by day and also in a writer, poet, and aspiring podcaster by night. And I've always been a writer. I've always written. My mom always tells stories about how I was writing stories before I could even write. She was kind enough to sit with me and kind of let me dare when I was really little. But it's something I've kind of always done. And I moved back to New York after about a year of living with my parents during the height of the pandemic in 2020. And I was kind of at a point then, kind of sort of because all of that, where I was really wanting to take my writing more seriously. And it can kind of feel like you're crazy when you don't have like a community around you. So before I found like you, Isolda, and our group, our creativity group together, I picked up the Artist's Way, and I started working my way through it. But yeah, like I think a lot of people, I got a lot out of the idea of morning pages, and I was really kind of building a little bit of a habit there, but I kind of stalled out after that. Like I let other things get in my way. And I think that to sort of get to that next level, this sort of process is really what I need to get there. So I really am excited about having this accountability with all of you guys. And I think it's exactly sort of what I need now at this point of my creative journey.
That's fabulous. And it's interesting how so many of us have gone, well, I happened to buy the book and now is the perfect time. Look at that. And one of the things that Cameron talks about in the book a little bit later on from where we are today, but she talks about synchronicity, and that once you open yourself to synchronicity in your life, you start either noticing or it just starts working in your life. And so, you know, I'm grateful to all three of you for being the stalwarts in the Vegan Writers of New York City group, because that's where this project was born, was being part of that group and really pushing ourselves and really exploring what our creativity has to say for itself. And I think that's a fabulous aspect of being creatives, is that we get to be adventurers and explorers, sometimes in our own minds. Sometimes we put podcasts and books and movies and songs and music and plays and dances and whatever out there for other people to share and enjoy. And it's interesting to me because when you read that first chapter in the book, Cameron talks about how she had gotten in a rut, and she was drinking a lot, and she had gotten into this creative rut, feeling like nothing she was doing was going to succeed.
Yeah.
And she had to end up reinventing herself in many ways and rediscovering her creativity. So I was wondering if you all would care to comment on your thoughts about what it would mean to rediscover creativity. And in fact, let me step back a little bit. What do you think the purpose of creativity is? Alan, would you like to go first? What are your thoughts on that?
The purpose of creativity?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an expression of life, right? I think we create because we can and we should. And there's a lot of things that we create because we need to, but it's always something that the best things that are created is because someone wants to create them, right? And I think when we think of creativity, we obviously think of artists and writers and poets and stuff like that, but it's obviously an unlimited force that is applied to all the sciences and, you know, just building scaffolding and and buildings, obviously, and bridges and like all that stuff that's in a way part of that creative energy, and that stuff that's we push from being the practical to the beautiful. And it's this sort of like dance of letting yourself be creative to really live. I don't know. How's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I was thinking when you were talking was form and function, right? The Art Nouveau folks that's what they did. When you look at all the work of Alphonse Mucha, you're looking at work where it was for biscuits, a tin of biscuits. And they said, create us the top of the tin of biscuits so we can sell biscuits. And he would create these incredible, beautiful art pieces to sell biscuits or to sell cigarettes, things like that. So it is this form and function piece that we look at when we look at creativity. And, you know, me, I'm a big innovation person. This is, of course, the Innovative Mindset podcast. And so it's, right. You know, to me, it's solving problems. Innovation is solving problems creatively, and that from that creative place. So what your point is well taken, that it is that form and function, that practicality and beauty all at the same time. Sergio, what are your thoughts on that? What is the purpose of creativity?
So I hope it's okay to just start with, I feel like it's a good segue, and I'm not sure if we were going to talk about the basic principles a little later, but just number one of basic principles in this book says creativity is the natural order of life. Life is energy, pure creative energy. And man, does that resonate with me very much. I really believe in energy being just a tangible thing, and it's reciprocal where it should be. And I feel like you mentioned before synchronicity and how helpful that can be. And I feel like that all ties to energy. And I think being able to allow yourself to be creative and just imagine an escape is very important, especially in a world where things are not always so fun, you know, especially over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure how I could live my life not being creative in some way. And I think it can help everyone. And that doesn't mean that you have to play guitar, that you have to be a painter. But like Alan was speaking about, you know, architecture or even, you know, cooking and things like that can all allow us to achieve that energy.
Oh, yeah. For sure. And, you know, I love that you read the first principle. I have the book with me, and I was actually going to read all of the principles. So you got us started, because I think it's important, especially this notion of life being creative energy. I mean, that's the whole point. That there's an Anais Nin quote that is, and I'm going to butcher it and I apologize. And then the day came when the pain it took to stay wrapped tight in a bud became greater than the pain it took to blossom. And the notion of creativity to me is always something that almost bursts out of you. You can't help it. And if you embrace that process and the journey of it, then it becomes faster and faster. And it can become frantic for some people. There are some artists who have paid a price for being too open, maybe, but being open to it only allows you to be more in the flow. And I think that there's a lot to be gained from that. So yeah, your point is well taken as well, Sergio. Megan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things she wrote that really struck me in this read through is how all of us are kind of inherently creative beings. And it really made me think that all the times in my life that I felt most kind of divorced from myself in all aspects of my life have really been the times when I haven't been creative, or when I think, you know, a lot of us tell ourselves like the lie sometimes that everything we make sucks, or that if it sucks, then it's not worth it. You know, like I definitely have fallen victim to that from myself at times. And
the daily voice.
Yeah. And I think that for me, especially I mean, I work in marketing, so I think I see this every day. Like storytelling to me is really how we change the world, you know, telling stories that matter, telling stories that make an impact, and doing that effectively is really where real change in the world can start. And I think thinking of it as something that sort of comes both from inside of us and outside of us is really motivating to me, because I think that that's something that everyone can nurture, but that everyone has to sort of find their own pathway to use that energy to create the impact they want to make.
Yes. I don't want to sound like I'm an echo chamber, but yeah, I agree with you. There's so much to be said for that notion of feeling most alive when you are creating, but also I love that you said telling stories that matter. I mean, you're coming at it from a writer's and a marketing sort of perspective, and I totally respect that, because I think, to get a little bit off topic, in marketing sometimes I see people telling stories that may not matter but that seem to work. And there's something to be said for being a critical thinker when it comes to the creativity that you witness, and whether or not it's something that is ultimately beneficial. And it may not be just marketers, it can be lots of other things, but there's a way for us to assess creativity, I think, and correct me if you all disagree, that also retains our sense of self and our sense of connection to what's really important to us. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody? Throwing it out there.
Well, I'm just, sorry, go ahead, Sergio.
No, I was just gonna say that just reminds me of and I'm sorry if I keep referring to the book, but when she was talking about a painter and how he mentioned that painting is a solitary act, but I belong, if you will, to a communion of painters. We are all together in our solitude, and I feel like that's a beautiful thing. You know, to be able to, you know, because sometimes writing on your own, you're just not sure how the process is really going, or if it's any good or not. And being able to create with other people and allow your creativity to blossom because of that, you know, motivation or incentive or accountability is a really beautiful thing.
For sure. And you know, it's interesting. First of all, don't apologize for reading from the book. We're talking about the book. So so for as far as I'm concerned, that's perfect. And yeah, absolutely. That notion of a sort of a community or a communion of artists where we are all part of the process is part of the reason, for example, that I started the Vegan Writers of New York City group, was because I wanted to find my community. I wanted to either find or form a community of creatives who are somewhere along the way on the same path. And that's one of the things I think this book does really well. If you do this process with a group, and she has an entire section at the end about doing this process in a group and how it's different than if you're doing it as a solo person. But if you do it as a group, there is this notion of accountability. And there's also this notion that we all tend to judge our own work very harshly. So wherever you are is where you are. And there's something to be said for the beauty of that accepting that you may not be as far along a path as someone else is. That doesn't mean your work is any worse or any better. It just means that you're in a different place along the continuum. And that process becomes really important when you're working with it as a solo person or as part of a community.
Yeah, I think that for me, doing morning pages over this past week, I'm starting to think that maybe one of the purposes of that exercise is to teach you that, like, it just has to come out of you. It doesn't have to be good. And that's really hard for me as someone who tends to be kind of a perfectionist. But I was thinking a lot about that this week, how like at one page, usually I'd be kind of like, just kind of saying like the normal like morning crankiness usually. And then after that, I would sort of get into like creative ideas and all the things that I kind of was aspiring to work on that day. And then by like page 3, when I was running out of things to say, that's when like it would start to get really interesting. Not always good, it still like usually was not good, but that wasn't the point, and I think that's really important to me as someone who sometimes just has not been it, because I just feel so much like it has to be perfect. Like it's not worth doing it if it's not perfect.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And if the morning pages aren't exactly like flowers of beautiful words, then why do them? I've been there. I totally know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, I agree with you. That's likely, at least partially, why you do them, is because it's supposed to be just a dump, a brain dump, or a data dump. And she actually in the book says, don't read what you've written in the morning pages. I actually do read what I've written because I've been doing morning pages since 1997. But I do go back and I read, and because there are things that I write that are ideas for book. I've gotten ideas for books. I've gotten ideas for songs. I've gotten ideas for art that I want to do. Characters have come strolling in the middle of me writing a morning page. And I went, oh, so this is what I've been noodling around in my subconscious and hadn't even thought about. So that's something that's important, that you sort of get introduced to your own subconscious if you do it first thing in the morning and you just let it flow out of you.
I kind of like, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just want to jump in there because like, we were talking earlier about, I think Megan, you were talking about marketing has to be like stories that matter. And then as older you went to you were talking about like, how do we not lose ourselves as artists? And to me, it was coming up as like, oh, these sounds like judgments, and we have to like stay away from the judgments. And this is what I'm taking away from it, especially the beginning of this book, is just like, we have to like really avoid looking for those things that are considered important outside of the immediate moment or whatever like that. But like, because we're working on it now, and because you're just writing about it, it's important. And trusting that like what you're putting down or putting out there is important. And I know that like there's the editors that have to come in but like, we don't want to jump to the editor brain while we're trying to like free the artist. I think that's what the morning pages is for me. Just like I can't read my morning pages. And if I lose my place, it's just like, whoop, I got to start a new thought actually. So I'm like just processing whatever is coming out. But I think I was just really attracted to that notion of just like letting, not judging the work and not trying to create something important or specifically like amazing, because like that's a hope, a goal, but it's not necessarily like the vulnerability of the artist or the freedom of the creator to just make whatever needs to be made, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. And that notion of don't judge yourself, there's a don't should all over yourself, but I think it should be don't judge all over yourself, especially since it's not supposed to be perfect. If your subconscious was perfect, I think we would be all living in some sort of bizarre Matrix-like sci-fi movie. That's not what the subconscious is. It doesn't deal in perfection.
Right.
It deals in mess. And so getting that out of you and seeing later, she says for the first few months, don't read your morning pages, read them, start reading them 8 months in or whatever. And that's what I did. And when I started doing that back in 1998. It was a long time ago. That's when I got the first inspirations for my album. Yes, I put out a music album so long ago. It was out on CD. That should tell you
Nice.
something.
Did you give it to
So-
people and then charge them $5 for it, or did you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's for, you can actually buy it. But anyway, yeah. So that's the thing, is like, I didn't know that I was a songwriter. I had no idea I was a songwriter until morning pages. I had no idea. I was always a song interpreter. So these things happened.
Now you're doing gigs and everything.
Oh,
right?
well,
That's
yeah.
so
I mean, I started doing gigs back in 1997 because one of the other things that the Artist Way inspired me to do the first time I did it was to start learning how to play guitar. I was always a singer. I was always a violinist, but I did not play an instrument I could sing with at the same time. And so that's when I started learning to play the guitar. And I've been performing on the guitar since 98 and still do regularly. So
That's
I
awesome.
really, thank you. I credit the morning pages for going. I actually wrote at one point, I just realized I don't play an instrument I can sing along with. I better change that. And literally that was what I wrote. And I went, I guess I'm going to go learn how to play guitar. And so that's the thing about the morning pages. And we're going to talk in a minute about what the morning pages are. Cause if you're listening to this episode, by the way, and you're going, what the heck what are morning pages? if you haven't read the introduction and the basic tools chapters of the book, that's what we're sort of talking about this. And morning pages are what Julia Cameron recommends that you do is every day, every morning, right after you wake up, have a notebook ready by your bedside and write longhand, so pen and paper or pencil and paper, 3 pages of whatever comes out of you, right? So this is not a there is no wrong way, there is no right way. The only way is your way. Whatever way you choose to do the morning pages, you do. But she does say 3 pages. And by the way, there's been a lot of debate on whether or not it's front and back. I do just 3 pages, so it would be front, back, and then the front of the next page. That's me. Other people might do it differently, but that's what I do.
I'm with you,
and
Isolda.
so- yeah. Otherwise, it takes an hour and a half, and I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, I co-sign.
Yeah. So bear that in mind. If you decide to do this process with us as we go through the vulnerability and the rediscovery of our own creativity, start doing the morning pages. And sometimes it's just literally blah, blah, blah. I will write blah, 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 frickin' blah, blah, blah. I have nothing to say this morning. And then a really great sentence to start with, just from me to you. If I were a person who knew what to say, what would I say? And just writing that down immediately brings up some sort of an answer and then it'll get you started anyway. So because you sometimes you will face the morning pages and you'll go, oh crap, I don't know. And so I'll start writing, oh crap, I don't know. But then I'll ask myself that question: if I were someone who knew what to say, what would I say? And I do that to myself for when it's wanting to do something. If I were someone who knew what to do right here, what would I do? And that sidesteps my own inner critic and lets me just get on with the work. So, but anyway, so to keep on moving this notion forward of creativity, I would love to ask you all, if you know, and you may decide that you don't know yet, what is the concrete thing you hope to gain from having gone through this process? Is there a concrete thing? Do you want to have a book written? Do you want to be open to trekking the Appalachian Trail? Like, what is it that you would like to see? Or is this too early in the process to ask? And you can feel free to say that too. Megan, why don't we start with you? Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I definitely want something concrete out of the process. I think, well, I think I would like something concrete, but also I kind of hope to come out with intangible benefits too. Like, I mean, I would really like to have finished and edited a book. Yeah, and I would also like to just have made some progress on like that resistance we talked about earlier, that I think a lot of other creatives run into this too, where like sometimes I can really talk myself into spirals where yeah, like I feel like if it's not perfect, then it's not worth doing. So I feel like even if I just did morning pages for 12 weeks, and I am going to do the whole process, but like even if I literally just did that, like just the progress I've seen in the last week gives me hope that like maybe I can make some progress there, and maybe start to get past that a little bit.
That's fabulous. And I love the notion that you've got such concrete goals. That's amazing. I'm not sure what my concrete goals are yet, but because I asked the question without knowing the answer. So to ask you a quick follow-up, this notion that you said about how the last week has changed what you're already doing. Can you talk a little bit about what that was? What was the change in just the week of doing the morning pages?
Really, I think what the morning pages did for me is it just removed that barrier. And like she talks a lot about the inner critic, how it's always kind of there playing interference. And I definitely feel like that's been a huge part of my creative process always. You know, it's always gotten in the way, gotten between me and the things I really want to do. And I think getting that stuff out there first thing in the morning has helped me produce better work later in the day. Like I can't, like usually because I have a day job and everything, I can't really get to my like creative work until usually the evening. And but having done morning pages right when I wake up, I can feel a difference in like the writing I'm doing later. So to me that's huge. Like that's definitely a difference.
It's already a difference. Yeah. It's
Nice.
amazing, isn't it? That's really cool. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Oh, geez.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, please. Sorry. Thank
No
you.
worries. No worries. Alan was like, I don't remember what we were talking about. I know this is a little bit more freeform because as she says, the artist's brain likes to play. So the question was, if you have concrete goals? Yeah. What are they? And if it's too early, that's totally cool. I completely understand. But if you happen to have any, what are they?
Well, I mean, I guess like I don't have there's a lot of things I have that I'm working on. Obviously, you guys are aware I've been working on a script, so that would be lovely to have done. Ultimately, I want to be able to have a lot of things done. And what I noticed the last time I did the morning pages was I started to have a lot of ideas and feel like there was more material inside me that I hadn't really investigated material inside me that I had a lot, like I just can't, I had an idea for a coffee table book, which I would have never thought to do before. And it was just sitting around in my apartment and saying like, oh, let me document my life in a way that might be through the stuff that I've accumulated over time. So that idea is out there, but I guess people have done that before. Anyway.
Yeah, but you haven't done it before, right?
I haven't done it before.
There you go.
So it's curious. So it's interesting to me. Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing I'm trying to remember is like, what's interesting to me. I have a big fear of doing what's already been done before. And I know other people are really good at just like following a pattern and be like, this is how you do that. And I'm always like, well, I got to find my own path. And so I guess what I'd like to find is a path that is mine. And even if it is someone else's path, it'll be the concrete thing to getting stuff done.
That's so interesting. You know, they say there's nothing new under the sun, and yet no one will tell your story the way you tell it. No one, because no one has your experience. No one has lived your life. So your story has validity and no one can tell it but you. So like what Megan was saying earlier about stories that matter is really important here because your story matters intrinsically. So I'm excited to see what you do. And you've told me about that idea for the coffee table book before.
I know. I remember.
Love it. I love it. I love it. You showed me pictures and everything. It was great. Like your writing bag and the bike and all. No, it was great. It was awesome. I will be buying that coffee table book when it comes out.
I guess I better make it
by the end of these 12 weeks. All right. Sergio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so as far as having any goals for going through this process, I think I have small ones and big ones. And if I can just talk about some of the small ones. One, for example, we were talking about earlier how hard it can be to not judge ourselves and judge our art rather. And I know I mentioned this when Megan was speaking, but
Mhm.
in the book, she mentions the daily voiceover, that petty, picky voice that brings us up short so often.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, from when I was hearing you all speak before about the morning pages, excuse me, that hopefully the morning pages can help with that daily voiceover
Mm.
and help it dissipate in a way, so it's not just picking at you all day, and that you can just be more present and embrace what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as bigger goals, yeah, I just this past year, like I mentioned before, I really want to just pursue the things I'm passionate about. So that is music and writing, screenwriting primarily. So I'm really hopeful that this book will help me achieve those things, or just learn more about them, and maybe learn more about myself, or learn about other things that I'm, maybe didn't even know I wanted to do. I really like dancing, so I'm not sure. Maybe this after this process, I might want to take a dance class.
Nice.
That might be premature, but I'm excited nonetheless.
Yeah. Why not? Right?
You might want to take a dance class during this process. Take
Yeah.
yourself on an artist date.
That's a great idea.
There you go. Yeah, that's a nice idea.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love that. If we were doing this in like the spring or summer, there's always dancing at Bryant Park. So that might be another thing to think about. Yeah. So yeah, I love that, Sergio. And I love the notion of like being just more present, being more present as an artist, being more present as a person. And me, what are my concrete goals? Concrete goals. So my concrete goals are, I want to have either representation for my book, which is being written by my pen name, Natasha Tyler, just so you know, and which is the Tarot Card Murders. That's the book. And I want to be just by the time this process is over, I want to be firmly in the editing phase of the Mindful Creative, which is, I'm not sure if it's a doable goal, but I'm going to definitely try. And the non-tangible goal is something that I actually came across in my morning pages today. And that is my role in my own head. Right. So what do I mean by that? I am a helper personality. I'm a fix-it personality. And that goes back to, I'm going to get heavy on you all, sorry, but that goes back to, I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I was the only person who was able to calm my father down enough to keep him from hitting all of us, my mom, my sisters, and me. And that started when I was very like 4 years old. I started having to do that because I was the only one who could tame him. It was bizarre. And so that sort of put me into this place of, my role is to help people. My role is to fix things for people. And for years, for decades, I was that person. I worked tech support at NASA and the National Geographic Society. So I did all of these things, and it was as a method of helping. And anytime I did something creative and people said, "Oh, you're such a great musician, singer, artist, whatever," I would say, "Oh, thank you," or the ever present, "Oh, you're so sweet," which I don't know if any of you have ever said that to someone who's complimenting you, but it's such a deflector. And so where am I with it is that today I went, I am an artist, and primarily an artist, not primarily a help other people be creative, or help other people save their marriages, or do tarot readings for other people. I'm looking to the book this time to sort of, be more present, but also to face the world as an artist, as a creative, rather than someone who is creative but primarily exists to help people. And so that's it's an interesting shift for me that I honestly, I've been subconsciously wrestling with for a very long time, decades, obviously. And it's meaningful because it changes who I allow myself to be in the world, and not just who I am in the world, because I am whoever I am, that's intrinsic, but what do you allow to show?
Yeah.
And that's a different prospect altogether, if you see what I mean. So what am I going to allow to show is going to be more me, but also it's going to be more artistic, down to the fact that, yes, I have purple hair and that's okay with me, and just a few years ago, me would not have dreamt of having purple hair. And now I'm like, I have purple hair and I love it. And that is, oh, thank you. And so that is part of what I want this process to be for me, is to sort of rediscover that, yeah, I am a creative and an artist, in addition to being a fix-it and a helper, but I'm also a creative, and I want to be a creative and an artist first and a helper second.
Yeah,
So
that's
there
amazing.
You go.
Zolda, that's amazing. I don't want to out myself as a fan of this show, but I heard you talk about this on your show a few episodes ago. I am a fan of the show. I will out myself.
Awesome.
Oh, you're amazing. But you were talking about seeing the carolers, or you were the carolers and you were seeing the dancers down in, is this DC, I think?
No, yeah, Nemacolin,
right.
but yeah, go ahead.
Nemacolin. Not too specific for me, thanks. No, just kidding. Nemacolin. And I want to say flummoxed. I was just surprised. I was like, Zolda doesn't think of herself as an artist. And of course we all have that block. And when you talk about being an artist as a helper, it's like another way we can sort of excuse our desire to be an artist, is if we justify it in some way, right? Like I can be a creative as long as I'm doing something. And I've been feeling that come to myself. I've been feeling that in my brain myself, like recently. I'm like, let me be an artist. And I'm like, well, maybe I can lift somebody else up. Maybe I can focus my energy on a younger artist who needs the help, or so that sort of like, it's just like another way of like not letting ourselves truly be an artist in a way, which is interesting because you see so many artists in the teaching fields and creating their path. And that is part of, I think, the artist is to teach and to share, but it shouldn't be, like you said, the primary. You should be able to identify as the artist you are, because you're an artist.
Thank you. I love it. Yeah. And it is interesting, isn't it? How, so, you're an artist, you have to teach, you have to do outside gigs of things you may not want to do. And interestingly, talking to what you were talking about, Alan, was Nemacolin, which is a big, huge private resort in Western Pennsylvania.
Helpful.
Where my caroling group was singing there, and the Saturday night that we were there, they had dancers from Alvin Ailey, Martha Graham, and the New York City Ballet come in and do a private show of parts of the Nutcracker. And talking to the woman, one of the dancers, the Martha Graham dancer, her name was Anne, talking to her afterwards, she was like, oh, it's so cool to see other artists being here, da, 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 da. And that was my reaction, was, I'm not an artist, even though, like, actually I had just been there singing carols. But the interesting thing to me about what I'm trying to say is that what she said was, lots of dancers who are ballet trained and Martha Graham, they do gigs, they take outside gigs from the shows that they're doing in New York, and they travel and they dance and they do. And artists do that. Artists teach, artists take all sorts of gigs that will pay the rent, because you have to, but you still primarily consider yourself an artist. And that's really important. And that's the lesson Anne from Martha Graham taught me at Nemacolin that night, because we have the right to think of ourselves as artists. And for me, it's a tough road, because primarily I've always been someone who supports others in their path, rather than going, wait a minute, my path has validity. I can do this too. And it will enrich the world if I do. And that's a tough sell for my brain. And so that's one of the things I'd really love to get out of this entire process. So there you go. Does anybody else have anything else to say before we go on to, because I have a list of a ton of questions.
No, I think we're good.
No.
All right. All right, cool. So really quickly, there's something in the book that she talks about that I would like to address, just because, to get it out there. She uses God as the creative force, God as the supreme, universal, highest, whatever. I just want to say, and I want to get your thoughts on this briefly too. You don't have to believe in God to go through this process. You don't have to call God. You don't have to you can call it universe. You can call it coffee table. You can call it chocolate milkshake. It does not matter, as long as what we're talking about is opening up to the creative flow, if you will. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, Megan and Alan and Sergio. Did it feel uncomfortable, or was it all cool? How do you feel about her explanation for God in the book, and what role that creative force will play in your work and throughout this process?
Yeah, so I thought, if I'm being honest, initially it was a bit uncomfortable. I don't know if it was uncomfortable, but I was taken aback by it. But after she explained, the way that you can see that, if you want, how you were just explaining it, I guess it made me feel better about it. And I was, it wasn't off-putting or anything. There was an acronym that she had. I forgot what it was. I wish I
Good,
had it written.
Orderly. Good. What is it?
There you go, Alan.
Good, orderly. Design. Divine. No. Good order design. Damn, I just read it recently.
I don't remember it. I know what you're talking about. It's an acronym for God, that's something like good order disorder.
Good orderly direction. There it is.
There you go. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Alan, for the win. Good orderly direction. So I really like that acronym.
Cool. Megan or Alan, what were your thoughts?
For me, it was definitely a little bit uncomfortable at first, but I think it did help me after I sort of read through more of her explanation. I actually read it twice just to sort of try to really understand what she was really communicating with that, and how she uses the word God, but it doesn't necessarily. I think the concept she's talking about, even though she's calling it God, it felt less like a my understanding of like a religious concept of God, and more like how I think all of us as creatives feel sometimes when we're like moved by something and sort of connected to a larger whole. So once I understood that, it was a little bit easier for me to deal with that and move past it. I think, because I think she's using a very specific and I think sometimes loaded word, but I think she is meaning to encompass a lot of different belief systems, and I mean, I think the ideas she's sort of creating with that word are meant to be inclusive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. And to me, I had to go through that process and kind of go in my own head, and work through it just to be comfortable with it, because this book asks you to be so vulnerable that if something is making you uncomfortable, it's a really good idea to think through it until you are, if not comfortable with it, at least at peace with coexisting with it. Alan, did you talk about this, or am I forgetting?
No, no, I didn't.
Okay.
I think it's really interesting that it's, to me, it's so interesting that it is such a specific point of order for people, that she goes to such efforts to put people at ease with her usage of it. And I think because people have very strong ideas of what this is, and for me, my understanding is more in line with what this is that we're all sort of like creators of of a God source, whichever that is, like the planetary alignments or whatever, like that we're here with this, with that creative energy inside of us, and we're part of that system of spiritual energy. And I don't know, I'll get lost down this road of
I completely agree with the spirituality of it.
Yeah,
but definitely
no,
you can see that people have like strong feelings about what's godly and what's ungodly, and I think just giving into this idea of like it's your connection to the universe is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Energy.
Yeah, to infinity. I like that, Sergio. That's great. That makes a lot of sense to me. And Alan, yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting, that notion of being what you said, God-like in the creative aspect. What I'm doing seems pretty ordinary and even commonplace to me, but it might be miraculous to someone else, someone who doesn't do what I do or thinks they can't do what I do. So as creatives, it behooves us all to remember that we are doing in some ways universal work because we are making something out of nothing. And that's a big deal. So, all right. Oop, hold on. I had to cough there for a second. All right. So one of the things that I thought about when I was reading these first couple of chapters was that to do this book, to go through this process, you're taking a leap of faith. And what I'd love to do right now, hold on one second. Once again, la, la, la. There we go. What Sergio did earlier, he brought up the basic principles in the book. And what I'd love to do is actually, do you all have the books in front of you by any chance?
I do.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, great. Yes, the copyright is not ours. We're just doing this for educational purposes, blah, blah, blah. You know, all of that. I would love it if we would read the basic principles, and there are 10, there are 3 of us. So Sergio, you've already read the first one. And how about you read the next 2? Then Megan, you read 4 through 6. Alan, if you want to read 7, 8, and 9, and I'll read 10.
All right.
Okay.
It sounds good. So number 2 is, there is an underlying indwelling creative force infusing all of life, including ourselves. Number 3 of the basic principles reads as, when we open ourselves to our creativity, we open ourselves to our creator's creativity within us and our lives.
We are ourselves creations, and we in turn are meant to continue creativity by being creative ourselves. Creativity is God's gift to us. Using our creativity is our gift back to God. The refusal to be creative is self-will and is counter to our true nature.
When we open ourselves to exploring our creativity, we open ourselves to God, good, orderly direction. 8, as we open our creative channel to the Creator, many gentle but powerful changes are to be expected. And then 9, it is safe to open ourselves up to greater and greater creativity.
And number 10, our creative dreams and yearnings come from a divine source. As we move toward our dreams, we move toward our divinity. And I love that last one because the way she talks about it is divinity is also inside us. And that just makes me so happy because to be truly creative, I think you need to accept that part of yourself. Any of these stick out for you? Any of these basic principles make you go, yes, exactly this. Megan, why don't you go first? Sergio, you go first.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No worries.
Well, I mentioned the first one really stuck out, but definitely number 4, we are ourselves creations, and we in turn are meant to continue creativity by being creative ourselves. I think was definitely another one that really stuck out to me.
I love that.
Yeah, for me, I think it was number 6, the refusal to be creative is self-will, because I think it is counter to our true nature to not be creative. And it really, I think, can help to remember that when we're denying that part of it, it's always something we're choosing rather than something that should feel natural. I don't know about anybody else, but it's always felt, I mean, sometimes I will tell myself that I should deny the creativity. I should not make this thing if it's not perfect, but it always feels wrong. It never quite feels right. Sure. to even if it might be right to abandon a project, it never feels right to abandon creativity entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, what are your thoughts?
Oh, just piggybacking on that, I think I've felt times where I needed to take a break, like when I was performing a lot, and I'd be like, I just need to not do this, but I'd always keep a little, some little piece that would keep me, that would just tie me back to my creativity and bring me back. The the line that stood out to me is, it is safe to open ourselves up to greater and greater creativity. And I was like looking through these lines as we were like, after you asked that, Isolde, I was like, what stood out to me? And I was just like, it really is just a bunch of different ways of saying, go be creative, let yourself be creative, just go fucking create, stop keeping yourself from being creative.
Yeah. All right. And now I have to put the little explicit thing on this.
Oh,
episode.
sorry.
No. You are totally allowed. I just, now this is my note to myself, because normally I don't. Normally it's a clean show, but if you don't, the FCC frowns on you not saying that it's explicit when it's explicit. So I just reminding myself that I have to do that. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So many of these speak to me. The one that Sergio talked about earlier about creativity being the natural order of life always says something to me. But also number 2, there's an underlying indwelling creative force infusing all of life, including ourselves. First time I read that, I immediately thought of Star Wars and May the Force be with you. I really did. And I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. So yeah. You know, and in fact, on Facebook, when it asks for your religion, I have the Force because that's really what I look at when it comes to doing this and really being part of it. The more you are creative, the more you are part of all of life, as far as I'm concerned. So that's how I look at all of it. So thank you for reading those. I appreciate it. And let us move on, because I don't want this to be a 45-hour episode. I have a 3.5-hour episode with T. Morris, who is amazing. He's an author and an entertainer, and we're friends. And so we talked literally for 3.5 hours. And yeah, it's a great episode. And if you want to learn more about podcasting or Twitch or Discord, he literally wrote the books on them. He wrote like Discord for Dummies and Twitch for Dummies. So you should check out his episode. But anyway, and one of the things that we've been sort of rah for most of this episode so far, but there will be highs and lows throughout the process. And if you're listening to this episode and you're going, well, I'm doing this with you all, even if I'm not on the show, please be aware that there will be times that are really frustrating, that you really come up against your own, as Megan put it, resistance. There'll be times when the inner critic will jump in and sit on your head and basically make you want to make excuses for yourself. So be aware of that anytime you start feeling that resistance, that's the time to double down on your creativity. So I wanted to throw that out to you. What you Sergio, Megan, and Alan, not necessarily someone who's listening to the episode. What do you think about that notion? Like, what excuses might you use to keep yourself from doing the book? What can you see yourself saying? Like, would it be like, oh, I don't have time, I don't have energy? You know, what are your thoughts on that? What might you say to yourself to keep yourself from doing this process that you've decided you're going to do?
I think for me, and what got me last time, and what I'm sort of fearful of or hesitant of, is just once you get into doing the work, which is asking the questions of yourself and like finding and writing to yourself, there's these moments where you sort of have to address yourself, your future self, your younger self. And I found it very challenging because it required a vulnerability that I feel like I was having trouble tuning into, or a memory. Like I couldn't figure out who my baddies were, and I couldn't figure out who my heroes were. And so I think I get stuck making choices, and as a Gemini, I've always avoided choices or making them, and it's not a great practice. And I think like just settling on something and being like, okay, let me address this, and if it's not that, then something else will come. But I think that's where I'll struggle, is just the little assignments that to myself that are just for me, and are like, figure out what that blockage is, figure out what's holding you from being the artist that you're trying to be.
Yeah, for sure. And that notion of figuring that out, it asks you to go super deep and remember things that you might not want to remember. Again, it's that vulnerability that you're called upon to bring forth and look at and be with. And that can be, there's an old jazz song called Good Morning Heartache, and the person is inviting heartache. Literally the last line of the song is good morning heartache, sit down, let me get you a cup of coffee, essentially. So you sort of have to be willing to look at all of the demons and all of the crud from your life and decide that your creativity is more important than those things, So yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying, Alan. Sergio, Megan, what do you all think? Any excuses you think you might hear yourself saying?
I definitely think my excuse, sorry, go ahead, Sergio.
No, go ahead, Megan. Definitely go for it. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. My excuse will always be that, I think to make progress, I'm going to have to face down the fact that, sometimes I'm going to write really bad stuff, and that has to be okay. It has to be okay to write bad things in order to eventually write good things. And I think the excuses I'm going to come up with will be mostly about that. Like, oh, if it's bad, then that means there's something wrong with this project. Or if it's bad, then, I should be working on something else, right. I anticipate that being really hard for me to work through, just because it's sort of haunted me for like the past 30 years of my life. So, yeah, I'm kind of braced for that, but I'm ready to go for it.
That's awesome. Sergio?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the excuses I've had in the past is I can be a creative that sometimes only wants to create when I feel the energy, the muse or whatever hits me, and I don't like to force it. Sometimes that can be an excuse though, right? Like, I'm not going to write because I don't want to force it, and it's going to be bad if I'm forcing it. So I'm hoping that I just don't make excuses like putting off things, in that way. Like, well, I'm not really feeling, I don't have the energy for it. So maybe I'll do the artist date tomorrow, or I'll do it the next day. And then, a week goes by and I didn't go on the artist date. So I guess those are some of the things I'm fearful.
Yeah. And it makes all sorts of sense. It does that. Oh, what, I'm going to wait. The muse isn't here. And I forget which author was talking about, they were asking him about his inspiration. He's like, oh yeah, I only ever write when my muse is sitting over my shoulder, but it's a good thing she's really willing to be there from 9 to 5 every day, so that's part of it. Yeah. I mean, and it is, and it's hard because there is this responsibility we have to ourselves, I think, to do what we say we're going to do, whatever that is, whatever you decide to embark upon, you put your money where your mouth is, and you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do. And that's hard. It can be really hard, especially if you're used to being in a flow state, and now you're going to have to gently nudge that flow state to appear when you want it to appear, rather than when it shows up on its own. Mine, I have a few. Time is one of the big ones. Is, oh, I don't have time. And that's not true. I have time. I just need to allocate my time differently. My hypothyroidism makes my energy levels low all the time. So I have to be very, very specific, I think, about my allocation of energy. Like, oh, I'm going to go on this artist date. That means I have to get enough sleep tonight. Otherwise, I'll be really actually physically too exhausted to go on this artist date. And then there's plenty of imposter syndrome, I think. And imposter syndrome is basically when you yourself inside your own head start going, yeah, you're not good enough for this. There's no way you should be doing this. So that is a voice to really watch out for, no matter what happens. If you're doing this process, if you're listening to this and you're doing this process with us, you're going to hear that voice. Maybe it won't sound like that. It might sound something that voice like is somebody amazing. Else.
Pretty
that should be in a cartoon somewhere. I love that.
I do voiceovers, so there you go.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and if you hear that voice, if that voice comes inside your head and starts telling you that you're not good enough, that you shouldn't be, the key here is that it sounds reasonable. That's that's the kicker. That's the pain in the butt, is that voice comes across sounding very reasonable. It's not reasonable. And I invite you to tell that imposter to hush up and sit down. But it comes along and it sounds like, yes, of course you're not good enough. Why would you ever think you are? And as soon as you start listening to it, it leads you around by the nose. So be very, very vigilant about that imposter syndrome, that inner critic, that censor, whatever the words are that you use for it. You don't want to let that thing have sway. So that's the other thing. All right, cool. We've already talked a lot about the morning pages, but one of the things that I want to say as far as the tools that we're using is that the morning pages are designed, like we've already talked about, to sort of bring stuff out, and for as far as Megan is concerned, it's also to help her not judge what she's writing. But if you want to make changes, morning pages are really good for this. If you keep whining about something in your morning pages and you keep seeing it, eventually you're going to have to do something about it. That's just how it is. So that's one of the things that I've found morning pages to be really good for me. And you might notice it as you go through this process, you, Megan, Sergio, and Alan, but also you, if you're listening to this. If the fact that you want to, I don't know, if you want to start walking every morning, keep showing up. Oh, I didn't walk again. Oh, I didn't walk again. Oh, I really wanted to walk. If you keep writing that on your morning pages, eventually there is that come to Jesus moment where you go, okay, I'm going to write my morning pages and I am going for that walk. So that's something that's really important, is that it's a great tool for that, because it'll keep hitting you on the noggin. You said you wanted to do this. You said you wanted to do this. You might as well do it, because otherwise you're just whining. And it's you telling yourself that, not anybody else, because nobody ever sees your morning pages. Don't read them to anybody. Don't let anybody read them. It's not about judgment. It's not about making it perfect. It's about getting down your thoughts, your ideas, your subconscious. So be aware of that. And then the next thing we haven't really talked about is the artist date. Somebody else want to take the explanation of what an artist date is? Sergio, Megan, or Alan?
I'll talk about it.
Go ahead, Alan.
Or yeah,
Go
Sergio.
Go for it.
Well, as I understand it, the artist's date is a chance for you to get to know yourself a little bit more. It's specifically for you to be alone, which, you know, a lot of people don't like being alone. So that can be tough, but it's also to do something that you are interested in, right? And to find those moments that you want to do something, and why aren't you doing it? What's keeping you from doing it? And I think, like, I don't know if you use an artist date to start playing guitar, Isolde, but it seems like something that would fit into that category of, like, go take a guitar lesson. I mentioned Sergio could do a dance class or something like that. And it's allowing you to find things to enjoy. To me, I think the idea is to enjoy life a little bit and enjoy what you enjoy. If that makes sense. So invest in yourself and what you enjoy.
For sure. And just to stop you there, Alan, or just to add on to what you said, actually, yes, it was an artist date. What happened was, there's this great music store where they do a lot of sales of used guitars called Atomic Music in Beltsville, Maryland. And one of my first artist dates, when I realized that I was going to learn how to play guitar, was that I went there and I didn't buy the guitar then. I just sat in the acoustic guitar room and I played whatever guitar I wanted. And I couldn't even play. Like, I had to figure out how to make an E chord or an A chord. I literally printed out a little chord chart so that I could go in and just start playing something on like 12, 13 different guitars. And that was an artist date, was just to go and play the guitars. It didn't cost any money. And I ended up becoming great friends with those guys. And I'll tell that story at another time, because you advance your artistic career when you put yourself out there. And we're going to talk about that in later weeks, but that's a really important point as far as artist dates go. And so, yeah, that is partially why and how I started playing guitar, was I went on an artist date in that way. So, anybody else want to weigh in on what an artist date might be?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, because I think I anticipate having having issues with maybe like maybe the inner critic trying to talk me out of this part even more than morning pages, because I get the sense that the purpose is to sort of teach you to create that space for you and for your creativity and to make it non-negotiable. Like she uses that word a few times, non-negotiable. And I think once you learn to make that space, even if it's a couple of hours a week for you and for something creative and fun that will refill the well, you're sort of subconsciously sending yourself the message that whatever you're going to create matters too, you know, like, and I think sometimes that might be like accept if you're having kind of a week where you're sort of questioning that about yourself, maybe.
For sure. Absolutely. And, you know, that notion that not only is it okay to go on this artist date, that it's not selfish, that it's actually a great thing for you as a being on the planet, but also that makes room. I love the way you said that. It makes room that to be okay for you to be creative in that time. I love that. Very cool. Sergio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just agree with all of the above. And I really like the notion that it can allow you to do things that you already love to do, but also take you out of your element and make you vulnerable in that way. And then hopefully allow you to be okay being vulnerable, which I think would only be beneficial with your creative work or your art. So I'm looking forward to the artist dates and the sense of adventure that I think it's going to add to.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You said, you know, things that you already love to do. It's also one of the things that she talks about, that Cameron talks about in the book, is that being creative, it's almost like it can deplete you. And so the artist state is a way to what she calls fill the well. It's designed in part to help you re-energize your own creative inspiration and your own creative ideas. Like one of my favorite artist states to go on back when they used to have these is I used to go to bookstores and I used to look at book covers. Just look at book covers. Just look at whatever book covers I wanted to, and I would just sit there and enjoy reading the backs of books just for fun. I also used to love to go to stationery stores and look at the different kinds of paper, and I love going to fabric stores, the patterns and the colors. And I used to go on these kinds of little jaunts before I ever read The Artist's Way. It was just something that I love to do. So when I started doing artist states, and I still do one every week, that's what I do. I'm like, oh, I used to go to Joann's Fabrics and used to look at fabric for fun. And I also love sunsets, for example. So an artist day for me tonight was a glorious sunset in Manhattan, which I missed, unfortunately, because I was working. But I would be out on the East River somewhere and taking pictures of the Manhattan skyline with the sun setting behind it. That to me is a beautiful artist day because it lets you create, yes, but also just take in the colors and almost the texture of the clouds. And there's something really powerful to me about that too. So the artist brain itself is what she calls the sensory brain. It does not necessarily mean that we're thinking in language when we're in artist brain. That's more of the logic brain, according to Cameron. She's not particularly neurological in the way she describes this stuff, but let's go with her on this. But let's ask you all. Megan, let's start with you first. Or actually, no, Sergio, let's start with you. What does that mean to you? What does the sensory brain mean to you as far as what she says and also as far as what you believe?
I think, like you were talking about earlier, that sometimes artists can deplete their energy, and using their sensory brain can allow you or help you to get that energy back. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But I think these artist states are all about play, right? And learning to be able to play again.
Sure.
And hopefully that just rejuvenating you in a way that you weren't expecting. I'm sorry if I didn't answer that correctly.
No, I think that's a great answer. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing about the artist state is it's not meant to be like a 7-hour excursion unless you choose to make it one. It can be 1 or 2 hours. It can be half an hour, as long as it feels like it fulfills the process of that time taken just for you to do something that fills your well, that inspires you in some way. And it can be 15 minutes, although I personally do about an hour if I can. But also you can combine things. I have been known to go to a bookstore and a fabric store in one artist state. Ooh,
Whoa.
I know, right?
Fancy.
I
Double
know.
whammy.
I know it's pathetic, right? But it's true. You can't, there are no hard and fast rules here. As an artist, as a creative, you have to do what works for you. And that's a lot of it. So Megan, what about you? What are your thoughts on the artist state?
I think that for me especially, like it's well, the idea, I mean, I think I've fallen before where when I'm working on a project, when I'm trying to write, I will sort of run that creative well completely dry. And then instead of taking that as a cue to, go on an artist date or, get some input in there so that, I'm rejuvenated and ready to go, I'll instead like blame myself and even punish myself sometimes, and or take it like it's a cue that I'm somehow just like not meant to be creative. So I think what this kind of practice can do is counteract that by creating a pattern for putting that input in there and making that sort of sensory experience sort of just a regular part of your life, so that you're always exposed to that inspiration, and that you're always you're not letting yourself run dry like that. I think it's really a really helpful idea. When I almost think like in the Western tradition, we're not necessarily trained to think of creativity that way, like as something that we should nurture the way we would nurture, any other kind of gift or talent we might have.
And the stress is often on the other parts, the logic, the being able to be good with numbers, all of that, rather than the creative, perhaps nonverbal aspect of who we are. And yet, interestingly, when I do a lot of research into creativity and innovation and how it applies to business for my day gig, if you will. And employers are all interested in soft skills now. They want creative people. In fact, creativity was like number 1 or 2 in all of the different tests for what leaders and bosses and business owners want in their staff, is they want creative thinkers. So being someone who is a creative thinker, being someone who nurtures that part of who they are, is super important, not just for a creative, as far as an artist specifically, because, I think we're all creative, blah, blah, blah. But it's important in the work part of your life as well. You can be super creative and be a designer for sure, but you can also have a rich creative life if you're a lawyer. Not saying to get creative with the law, but allowing yourself the inspiration of thinking outside the box, because you're in touch with that creative part of yourself, can do amazing things for lawyers, for accountants, for business people, for architects, certainly for nurses and doctors and whoever, even if being an artist is not their primary objective for their lives. Thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I was just listening to you and thinking like being given the freedom to be creative in whatever you're doing is actually, it's a gift, right? It's giving you a chance to thrive in whatever environment you are in, when everyone needs you to be necessarily you got to be perfect or you got to fit into a little box. It's like, well, this may have been where I wanted to be, but it's not where I want to be now, because now I feel like limited. But like in that chance to be like, you can make this your own little moment. You can, for some reason, I'm just thinking about catering and like giving people a chance to like flourish their bar set up the way they want to, and like design it in a way. Like, I don't know why that's the image that's in my brain right now, but just having that moment rather than like, okay, you're like, like you have to have that moment to be like, this is your choice to do what you want to do here. Picking those moments to give people creative, or to take creative freedom for yourself, actually, is what you have to do.
Yeah. And what's interesting though, what you just said, to me, listening, yes, you can take it for yourself, but wouldn't it be wonderful to work in environments where the leader, whoever the leader is, the boss, the owner, whatever, is encouraging you? You know what? I don't know your job. You know your job. You know it better than anyone else because you're the one doing it. Have at it. Set it up the way that is best for you. If that's a creative setup, great. If it's a more, orderly setup, whatever is the thing that inspires you, you should do. Why? Because you're the one who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be amazing if leaders did that, if they went, yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm on a mission to inspire leaders to be ethical innovators, is because of that very thing, that if you inspire your people to do the right thing in a creative way, they will, and they will do incredible, miraculous things. So yeah, I agree with you completely. All right, cool. So I want to talk a little bit, and did we all talk about this, or because I'm starting to lose myself? Did everybody get a chance to talk about this topic real quick, or no?
Yeah, I think we're good to go. To move on.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about that inner critic. I want, because that's going to come up a lot for us. It's going to come up a lot for you if you're listening and you're going along the process. One of the things that I will say is that often that inner voice, that inner critic, it's sort of the judge, the jury, and the executioner before you even start on your creative endeavor, whatever it is. So you're going to feel that resistance. And I encourage you, please figure out what works for you to make it lose its power. And one of the things that I do is I named my inner critic a long time ago. My inner critic's name is Murgatroyd. And Murgatroyd it's very easy for me to go, Murgatroyd, sit down and hush up. And once you name it and give it as silly a name as you possibly can, it's a really nice, easy way to get it to stop being so ever present in your head. Is you actually tell it to sit down and hush up. It works really well. So what are your thoughts on the inner critic? Any guidance for anybody who's listening?
I love that name, first and foremost. It sounds like a Decepticon, right? And that's short for deceptive. So that's a really good name choice. I'm sorry,
I love it. I had no idea.
I'm sorry, Megan, you were going to say?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, like, as someone who's like had a ongoing battle with the inner critic for decades now, I think that what does work for me sometimes in getting past it is sort of like you said, Isolde. I personify it a little bit, but in kind of a different way. I think of it more like a yappy little dog. It's it's noisy. It's making noise because it's afraid. It's there to try to protect me. And so if I just kind of acknowledge that, like, what the purpose of it, why it's coming up at this moment, sometimes that can help me move past it enough that I can do my work. Like, really, it just wants to be acknowledged. It just wants to know that it has a place, and then I can move past it.
I love that, and I love that what you said. I don't know if you've ever read Sapiens, the Yuval Noah Harari book. He talks a lot about that part of our brain that is it's a survival thing. That inner critic is actually the remnant of when we were worried about, I guess, saber-toothed tigers, right? It was the part of us that was fight, flight, or freeze. What do we do? Is it safe? And the inner critic is often telling you, you're not safe if you're creating. And so we kind of have to go, it's going to be okay, like you said, Megan, and tell it to sit down. It's all okay. Everything's okay. I'm going to be over here doing this really cool creative thing, but it's still okay. And it's interesting to have that conversation with yourself. But once you know that that's why you're having it, it becomes a lot more powerful in your ability. You become more powerful in your ability to keep creating despite that yappy dog or inner voice. Alan, what are your thoughts?
I'm just thinking about people who are on, like, friends of mine on Facebook who have taken up different skills like knitting or just little hobbies that they do, and then they put them out there, and I see those things and I'm like, how do they find the time to do that? Are they going to make money at that? And like realizing that I block, like, if there's something I want to do, but it's like, it's not financially motivating or something, like there's not a way to sell it immediately. I feel like, oh, this is a waste of time somehow. Oh, is this Uh, so I know it feels a little off topic, but I think like you have to let yourself do things that you want to do because you want to do them. And all the people that I admire are doing the things they want to do, and they've just focused on the things they want to do. Just there's a guy I've done some work for in his house, and he's a influencer, I guess is the way to, define him. His name, I don't know, I guess I'll say his name is Kerwin Frost. He's just this great, gentle bear of a human being, and his wife's super nice, and they just are creatives, and they just make content, and they just have fun doing it. He dresses up in crazy outfits, and he's just amazing to see what he puts out there, and he's just doing what seems fun to him, as far as I can tell. He's just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like you do have to follow that fun and move past that inner critic. I haven't quite figured out how to shut him down. Maybe I need to name him.
It works.
Name him, or just
was the word I was thinking of.
You can name him Alan, or just picture a really cute puppy yapping at you.
A cute puppy. Well,
what you were saying your name? You were thinking of a name, Alan?
Oh, Punkus.
Okay.
Punkus is the word that's come to me. So maybe I'll name my inner critic Punkus.
Cool. It's
so
a good
wish
name.
Me luck.
Yeah.
And I wish you all luck.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I love what you said, that, they're doing it because it's fun. They're following their sense of fun. And wow, I love the notion of not being a tortured artist. I've always loved the notion of not being a tortured artist. I am not a tortured artist. I am a fun artist. That's how I look at it. All right. We could probably keep talking and talking and talking, but I know that you all have lives to get back to. I just wanted to do one other thing, or two other actually three other, no, wait. Two other things. First, two other things. Yes. Three actually, because I want to thank you for doing this. All three of you. This is so cool already. Talking about this and getting it out there so that we can hopefully inspire lots of other people to rediscover their sense of fun and their sense of creativity and their sense of joy in creating in whatever way they create. It's a sacred task as far as I'm concerned. So I'm super grateful to you that you've decided to take this on and to do this for the next few months.
Awesome. I cannot be more excited.
Sorry.
Oh, it's no. It's good. We're all talking over each other. It's great. It's as if we were sitting in the same room. And yeah, it's going to be some work, and I think we're up to the task, and it's going to be really cool. And then one of the other things that I wanted to do is say that for this next week, for the first week, we read the introduction and the basic tools. For this next week, Monday night, we're recording this next Tuesday, to the episode will be out, which is the 11th of January. We will have read week 1. I don't know what chapter it is, chapter 3, I think, week 1, recovering a sense of safety. And so our mission for this week is to read week 1, recovering a sense of safety, and do the exercises, because there are exercises in it, in every chapter. That's one of the things. Morning pages and artist date are necessary, Julia Cameron says. The other exercises take you into some really interesting in-depth places. So bear that in mind. And so by next Monday, when we meet to record this, and next Tuesday, when the episode comes out, we will have read and gone on our artist date and done the exercises, and we'll be talking about what our experiences have been of going through this chapter of this week 1, chapter 3, week 1. And it is interesting, and it's going to take us into some, we've already all been vulnerable tonight, as you can hear, but it's going to go into some vulnerable places. And I invite you now, if you are in a vulnerable place, or if you want to talk about anything, drop me a line. I'm at Isolda T just about everywhere, but DM me on Instagram or on Twitter or whatever, because I'd love to talk to other creatives who are going through this process, and maybe we can have you as a guest on an episode in the future. We'll see. So that's the other thing I wanted to say. And then the last thing that I wanted to do before we ask for last thoughts is there's in the book, there is on page 23 of the edition I have, there's an actual contract. And we are going to right now on the air, as it were, all four of us sign the contract. And I'm going to read the contract to you. And then we're all four are going to sign it, because it's a contract you're making with yourself for your own creativity, for your inner artist to come out and play. So here is the contract. I, state your name, understand that I am undertaking an intensive guided encounter with my own creativity. I commit myself to the 12-week duration of the course. I, state your name, commit to weekly reading, daily morning pages, a weekly artist date, and the fulfillment of each week's tasks. I, state your name, further understand that this course will raise issues and emotions for me to deal with. I, state your name, commit myself to excellent self-care, adequate sleep, diet, exercise, and pampering for the duration of the course. So now I'm going to ask all my co-hosts in this, my partners in crime, to go ahead, and mine, I have an actual gold Sharpie. So fill out your contract and sign it, please. Here we go. I feel like I need to have the dum 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 dum, the Jeopardy theme music going. Dum 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 dum, and then we need the other part. Okay. And if you are listening and you want to sign the contract while we're signing it, feel free. Mine is signed literally in bright gold Sharpie. Woohoo!
Right.
I did mine in brown metallic.
Awesome.
I just used
Sign
the
mine
pen.
red ink.
What was yours, Megan?
Oh, I just said I signed it in bright red ink, so I cannot possibly miss it.
No, you
Nice.
cannot. And Sergio said, I just used a pen. And that works too, doesn't it?
It doesn't feel as special, but it's still special.
It's still special because it's a commitment we're all making to ourselves and each other to go through this process of creative discovery. I'm not going to call it creative recovery, because I think we are not necessarily recovering anything, but we are definitely discovering different aspects of who we are as artists and as people. So I'm going to open it up to all of you. Are there any last thoughts that you have before we say goodbye for the night?
I'm going to say one thing because it popped up to me when I was reading, but because we've been in the first week this week, and I read this and I felt like I was reading it for the first time. She says, you don't have to do all the exercises. Some of them you can come back to, but you try to do several of them. I think that might be a relief for some people, and obviously other people may want to do them all, and that's fine too.
Yeah, again, there are no mistakes. I would say though, morning pages and the artist date are pretty critical, but the other exercises, yeah, feel free to, that's a great point, Alan. Feel free to maneuver and navigate that process as you see fit.
Yeah, my
Megan,
point is not to
Sergio?
discourage anyone, but just to encourage you to do it however you can do it. There you go.
Yeah, works. That works. Yeah. Megan, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I'm so excited to go through this. I think even just what I've seen from the past week, I think I have so much room to improve in this area, and I've needed to go through it for a long time. So it's great to finally have like this little bit of accountability and to get to share it with you and your audience, Isolda. It's fantastic.
Yay. I'm so excited about this. I'm hoping lots of people are listening. If you're listening, drop us a line, let us know. Or if you're in New York City and you're listening, think about joining the Vegan Writers of New York City group, because we're probably going to be talking at least some about this in our upcoming meetings. All righty. Sergio, any last thoughts?
Yeah, just thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm really grateful. Thank you to Alan and Megan for being awesome. And yeah, I'm excited to see how this process goes with all of you. Thank you to all the listeners as well. And Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
That's so sweet. Happy New Year. That's right. All right. So here we go. We have completed the introduction and the basic tools chapter next week. You will be able to hear us talk about week 1. And as always, once the podcast episode is out, it's going to be out. So if you're coming to this in the year 2024 or 2027, the podcast episodes are there. Find the first one and listen throughout, and you'll be able to join the process at any time. We are all inclusive here. So I just wanted to say that too. All righty. If you've enjoyed today's episode, first of all, I would love to hear from you, and or leave a review of the show on Apple Podcasts, or I think Spotify has just put out a rating system, which is super cool. I would love. It would mean the world to me if you did that, because that helps me know whether or not I'm on the right track. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you that ethical innovation means that you are trying to solve problems creatively while doing the right thing. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, remember to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind.